Okay, well, thank you so very much for inviting me. I love doing these club meetings. As I said, I'm in the 90s so far this year. Sometimes I'm doing two a day, East Coast, West Coast, or the UK and Australia. I love sharing this hobby because, as you're going to find out here tonight, I am just enthralled with this hobby. I've been in it since 1956 when I was just a 15-year-old kid. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take some time to go through the history of where I came from and why I think it's important for everybody to understand what's going on in this great hobby. And I call it the science of audio. It is far beyond audio. We're getting into all kinds of things tonight. But first, I'm going to do a little history. In 1950, I was an accordion player. 2 years later, my parents thought I should have a B3 Hammond, and that was quite something because they weren't wealthy people. But I really scabbered on that deal, playing 3 and 4 hours a day, taught myself. 2 years later, I ended up with a job in a restaurant making $50 a weekend. And that was a 15-year-old kid doing this. So I really was moving forward. And then 2 years later, I became the organist at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. And what's so important, why I talk about this first, you might say, what's that got to do with it? Has everything. In fact, even for you, where that picture in the lower right, the organ had over 4,000 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot. We had to voice and tune those. Tuning is no big deal, octaves, but voicing, you had to learn to listen. And a lot of people don't know how to listen, how to go in and dissect what you're hearing, all the harmonic values and things. And it's very important. And we'll get into a lot of this tonight. We're going to get into the Bell Lab studies, and I think you'll be very enamored with what's going on here. I became a ham in '56. My high school chum had a license, so I did. It was something I never thought about much, but I did it. And the Harvey Wells that you see there on the lower left, get this camera out of the way. You'll probably be able to see it here down in that lower left over there. That Harvey Wells is still working. I was on the air this morning. I'm on the air every morning on AM with it. And I enjoyed that. And a few months after I was licensed and on the air, you'll see that little box on the left, that little meter. I built my first transmitter, 2E26. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And the Harvey Wells, it was still there. Of course, in those days, Gonsets ruled. They really did a marvelous thing. But one night I'm on 6 meters. I was a technician for 17 years. There was no need to go down to 20 meters or wherever because the band was open 24/7. And when I say that today, guys go, what are you talking about? 6 meters was like 75 meters. Amazing. And I just really got enamored with that. Well, one night I'm tuning around on 6 meters with my SX99, and I heard the most ridiculous, distorted, horrible signal. Oh, what is that? Came back the next night, there he was again. So bravely, I've only been on the air a few weeks, I called him. Now, you understand, in those days, we were crystal controlled. So he might be down here and I might be calling over here and he has to tune. That's why once in a while you'll hear some of us old codgers say CQ, and tuning. And you have to tune. Well, today it's all transceive. Anyway, I came back and called him. He comes back to me and I was like, whoa. And I pushed the BFO button. Didn't know what that was until, aha, that's that sideband stuff I've been reading about in QST on 6 meters. Whoa. So we really started a great friendship. I'd meet with him every night because he was building this and I was his little testing station. And is this better, that better? I was 50 miles from him. But one day he said, hey, come up and see me. Well, I was driving into St. Louis. I had a 54 Plymouth convertible. I was only 15. I had a very special license by the state of Illinois that I could drive at that age to my work. And I would drive the 50 miles to the Fox Theater. He said, I'd play for 8 minutes and then we'd have the show for about 3 hours. He said, come see me. Well, I rolled up in front of the building, and what was it? KMOX radio. Larry Burroughs was the chief engineer of CBS. And I go in and ask for Larry. I didn't know his last name. And the receptionist says, well, we have 3 Larrys here. I said, well, he's a ham radio. Oh, shit. You want Larry Burroughs. He comes out, and it started a wonderful friendship for many reasons. And he toured me all through KMOX. That was quite something for a little kid from Marissa, Illinois. And I said, would you build me one of those sideband transmitters? That sounds like something I'd like to do. No, he said, I can't do that. And I'm thinking, what do you mean you can't? You built yours. But I'm going to teach you how. And he did. And that started my love of building, which is still with me. So what we did, he had me buy a Central Electronics 10B kit. We put it together. That was one of the first single sideband transmitters. And there's another interesting part. If you had a trivia contest and said, who brought single sideband to ham radio, you'd all say what? Art Collins. Nope, he was 6 years later. The deal there was that Wes Shum was the guy in 1948 that had formed Central Electronics. So I built the 10B, but we took out, didn't plug in, the 20-meter coil. Larry taught me how to use a grid dip meter. And so now what do we need? Well, wait a minute. We had 14. Oh, I know what we need. We needed 36 megs. So Larry taught me how to build a 36 megacycle oscillator using a 6U8. Bingo. Plug it in. What do you got? 36 and 14, you got 50. I'm on 6 meter sideband. The station grew very quickly. I mean, within a couple of years, I just went freako nuts. I think I'm still doing that. You'll see it there on the left. And I also was really into antennas. My loving parents, my goodness, from buying that B3 and all that allowed me to do anything. But I wanted to put up this antenna, 110-foot Roan and a 36-foot-long Telerex on 6 meters. Up above it, we put up a 432. That didn't last very long. I wasn't too happy with that. And we were dyed-in-the-wool 6 meters and 2 meters. So that really went well. But the antenna I used was special. I had read about this, not knowing exactly what was happening. And you're going to learn tonight why that antenna looks like that and why it works so well. The spiral array was short-lived, but man, did it work. And you'll notice that the elements aren't horizontal or vertical, and we're going to learn about that, really. You got a lot of stuff to learn tonight. But I took that down, just experimenting. I put up a pair of Telerex, a 35-foot-long, 2 meter, but notice one's vertical and one's horizontal. And I had read where I could bring the leads down, the coax down. I used a times T50 coax. It was really, really great stuff for VHF. And we could wind with coax, make some links, and take one of them in or out of phase. Whoa. We're going to learn more about that later because phasing is one of my favorite subjects. But I just went nuts with antennas. And my parents allowed me to do this because I was making a lot of money as a kid playing the organ. I was teaching and doing. I didn't go to high school very much. I passed, but not very good grades because I was playing the organ professionally at the Fox Theater and at various other functions and stuff, as well as I was teaching in the Hammond organ studio. Well, I continued on with my ham radio at the same time, all this going crazy. And that that was the station in 59. I replaced the 10B with a 20A and built a transverter, one of the very first. And I built a 6 and 2 Thunderbolt. That gave me 1.5 kilowatts on 6 and 2 meters. I was really serious about this hobby. And I got a call one day from Bob Drake. And Bob said, we'd like to have you come to our meeting of our club. We hold it once a year. It's a technical meeting. And we want to know how you built that. Well, I told him the story that Larry helped me, but Larry couldn't get away from Camo X, so I had to go it myself. One of my friends had a Bonanza airplane, and we flew up, went to the Biltmore Hotel. They had taken all the furniture out of one of the floors. They had the Collins room, the Hallicrafter room, Central Electronics, Mosley, all of these great companies, and the people. Bob Drake was there explaining and helping to sell his Drake equipment. That was the Dayton Hamvention, 600 people in the Biltmore Hotel. And that held for a few years until 64 when they moved to Hara Arena. So this little kid was, I was scared to death, let me tell you. I hear all these giants, and I had only been in the hobby a few years, and oh boy, but I had fun, and they respected me and helped me with questions and answers. One of them came to me, and he said, we're looking for somebody like you. I'm from London. We have a company called J-Beam, and we want to put this antenna up and do some checks. Would you mind doing that? No, it's not in my vocabulary. So what did they do? They sent over 128 elements on 2 meters. And I had a really good ham friend, K9 SGD. He lived in Sparta, a few miles south of Marissa. And he was a Motorola dealer, so he knew a lot about hooking all this stuff up. I didn't. I learned pretty quick. And one of my other friends, K9 EBA, was a contractor, and he had cranes and bucket trucks and all that, and that's how that got erected in a spare lot beside our house. Well, as you can tell, it was something very special. I went on, and in 1961, I built the first transmitting converter. I didn't know. I was just having fun and doing stuff with Larry Burroughs. I didn't know that this wasn't happening other places. CQ Magazine acquired me, and we started a VHF single sideband column. Now think about that for a minute. It was so new and so important, and we would write monthly documents on emails. They weren't emails, the letters guys would send me, and we'd tell about what they were doing. And we got into moon bounce with the big array, and I didn't know what I was doing there, but I was having fun, and I was doing it, not knowing, but hey, we were doing it. VHF Magazine came to me. I did some stuff for them, but then Joe Hall, the Motorola dealer, he said, man, that transverter you built is something. You need to put that on the market. And so we did. And it was my first entrance to anything commercial on the market. I was 22 years old, but he did most of it. He had the company called Hallert. His name was Hall. And we brought out the first transverter for 6 meters and one for 2 meters, and then an 829B doing 100 watts. That was a big deal in those days. So things really progressed very quickly. And I really mean this in every respect. Amateur radio was and still is my college professor. I was building things like crazy and doing things. Later on in life, you probably remember the FM movement. I started that, taking CB radio boards that I had bought from High Gain when they went bankrupt, and making a few little additions, and bingo, we on 10 meter FM. And there were, we had over 1,000 of those boards I bought from them. And then I made little kits up, and we went crazy doing all this kind of stuff. At the same time, I got another job at the Holiday Inn in St. Louis. It was across the street from McDonnell Douglas. And also Mosley Electronics was across the street. I built a pipe organ in that restaurant. It was a 4-star restaurant, German restaurant, great food and all that. Well, the situation was that I, I've always wanted to do this, but I didn't have a place to put it, so we did. And it became a very popular restaurant in the Midwest because organ fanatics, they'd come in busloads, clubs from Kansas City and up in Des Moines and Memphis, and they'd come and stay at the Holiday Inn over the weekend and get to hear the pipe organ in the restaurant. So it was fun, but I had to drive back and forth. That was 50 miles from my home in Marissa. And the reason I show you this is I had some pretty crazy mobile rigs. I bought a brand new Thunderbird. It's hard to see there, but I had 2 halos on it. I had a one for 6 meters and one for 2 meters stacked. And oh man, did I have fun. I had built I took a Swan. It was a 240. And I took it all apart and put it on 6 meter. Why not? Sideband mobile in about 63. I was doing that. Later on, I got still into Thunderbirds, and I had a KWM1, a 1956 KWM1, and a 1956 Bird. In 1966, I kind of got tired. I'd been playing for 15 years. And I thought, I'm going to open a Hammond organ store in my hometown. We're 50 miles southeast of St. Louis. That's my dad standing down there in that halfway in that picture. Mom had a men's ready to wear. But ye old music, it became the rock and roll capital of the world, as you're going to find out. But right in the first, I was just building Hammond organs, customizing them, because I knew them backwards and forwards in all the years. And we were the first guys to cut them in half so that they didn't weigh 300 pounds and people could cart them around. But the bands started discovering about this guy with a soldering iron in his music shop. I had no idea about rock and roll music. I was dyed in the wool. George Wright, Jesse Crawford, Lynn Larson, all these great theater organists, and hardly paid attention to the Beatles. But here I am. Kids coming in, never will forget this one kid came in and he had this box and he said, you fix things here? And I said, what you got? And it was, believe this or not, it was my first guitar amp that I had ever seen. And I said, what's wrong? Well, I don't know, it blew up. Okay, he probably tried to make it go to 12 and it only went to 10. So I opened it up. Whoa, what is it? Pair of 6L6s. And a 5U4. Now, wait a minute. 6L6s and a 5U4, huh? Guess what? That's what's in that modulator of that Harvey Wells that I knew so well. So away we went. And the band started coming to me like crazy. We're talking about REO Speedwagon, Michael McDonald, Danny Fogelberg, on and on. But they weren't known by REO because they were still in high school. But they would come to Marissa and buy their gear, and I started really learning. I stocked up heavily on very, very exotic guitars and amplifiers, and we really did become the rock and roll center of America. But renting the B3 Hammonds, I'd go into these concert halls and terrible little bitty columns to fill 20,000 seats. So the Fox was throwing out some speakers. It just so happened. So many things in my life just happened. So blessed. So I said, hey, can I have those? And he said, sure. So I get a truck and I take him to Marissa. And I had a friend that had a fiberglass shop. And we made fiberglass horns with JBL drivers. And bingo, that's one side of this thing. I didn't know no one had ever not done this. I didn't know that. And so away we went, having fun. People like Dolly Parton, Jerry Lee Lewis, Porter Wagner, Bucko, and a lot of country people would come into the Kiel Auditorium once a month. And of course, the managers loved it because they had this big PA. But the Fox called me one day and said, you still have those speakers? And I said, I do. This was 1970. He said, talk to this guy. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, this band came in to the theater at 4 o'clock today, and they're supposed to be doing a concert here tonight, but their equipment didn't show up. Really? Well, if all of you or any of you are rock and roll historians, you already know what's coming. The Grateful Dead were on tour with a little short 6, 8 cities. They were not to be out of the state of California. They were okay. Their sound man, he was one of the people that actually kind of like invented LSD. And he was on probation out of the state. The FBI knew about it, found out about he was out. So they go to New Orleans to the first gig on this little tour. Sat in the back row. So when the show was over, the band comes on to St. Louis, didn't have cell phones. Owsley loaded the gear in the big truck. And when he padlocked the truck, the FBI padlocked him. Well, they get there at 4 o'clock on the stage of the Fox, and it's like, what's up? And so he handed the phone to Jerry Garcia. And I told Jerry what I had. And this JBL, the drivers and the speakers and the Olsen horns and tweeters and Macintosh. And he said, you have Macintosh amps? And I said, yes, sir. Oh, man, you got to get that thing up here. I said, I can't be there before about 9 o'clock. That's okay. We'll keep him entertained. And he did. You can go into Google and you can put the night rock and roll sound was born. There was somebody there that night, a journalist, that wrote the article. And it was every word true. That's the way it happened. And we went on to the rest of that tour, which saved them because they didn't have any equipment. And we hit the front page of Billboard magazine, this little music shop in 2000 city of Marissa, Illinois, in the coal fields, gets this contract. Well, everybody's calling me, and I mean everybody. I didn't even know half of these people. And hey, I was having fun. Why not? Notice that guy in a white shirt on Humble Pie, got a white sleeve sitting there on the curb. That's Peter Frampton. Young Peter Frampton came over here with Humble Pie as a guitarist, but the management pulled him out later on and did a solo. We're going to talk much more about that. Here's a group that we did their first tour, and we're still with them all these years. Who is that? You'll never guess. Nobody ever does. That's ZZ Top without beards. It was their first tour. And we've been friends all these years. Great people. I love these people because Billy is so well read. Oh my gosh, he knows a little bit about just about everything. But I got another phone call. Whoa, hello, who's this? This is the Who. The Who? What's up? You're the guy that I read about. You got this big PA, we need it. Well, wait a minute. I'm on tour with Chaka Khan in Chicago. All my gear's up there with my staff, and we got a contract. I don't care who you're with. We need it tomorrow at, what was it, 4 o'clock, whatever they did subject. Okay. He said, we had a miserable time. We came over here with new music, and we had these little column arrays, and they didn't cut it. Well, no, they didn't. But in that 4 years that the Who had not toured here, yours truly had lifted the bar. And so what are they going to do? So I said, well, I can't get there if I could. Oh, yeah, you can. I said, look, we're the first company to ever rent a semi, because most of the groups had put the guitars in a Volkswagen van, another guy would have something in a pickup truck, and some would get there and some, it was hectic. I solved that. Everything went into the semi. My people drove it. Everything's cool. Well, how am I going to get all that, even if I could? So I called a friend of mine that was doing some sound work in Chicago, and they took over the Chaka Khan thing. He said, you go out to the airport and you rent a Tiger Air Freight and you can drive your semi right up there. I'm glad they were paying for this. Away we went. And we saved that whole tour, if not their career. And their new music was very different, but man, was it great. And after that tour we did, that was 2 years on that tour. And Pete called me, Pete Townsend, one day, and he says, hey, I need you to come over here. I got an idea. You do? What's up? Well, you get over here. So off to St. Louis, jumped on the TWA and off to London. This was really cool because what happened was he had an idea. Quad sound was big right then, and he wanted to know if I could build a PA that we could move Roger's voice around the hall. Well, of course we did. We'll come back to that. What you're looking at on the screen is his upstairs of his home on the Thames River in London. And all these different synthesizers, and he was really into it way premature from anybody else. But one of the very cool things was what he's sitting with that red chair up there. That's a little Lowry home organ, a little $900 home organ. Why am I bringing this to show you? Do you remember this? That's the beginning of Baba O'Reilly. And it was done, you'll see in the right upper, on that organ coupled to a synthesizer, but he was using the tone generation. He loved the tones out of that Lowry. This is how innovative some of these guys were. And so I said, hey, time is right. We had just been working on a new console. Nobody had built a good console, any kind, good, bad, or whatever, for strictly rock music concerts. And I was working with a sister company in England, IES. And there it was. Whoa! Timing was perfect. And we went off into the tour with them for Quadrophenia, and oh man, it was just heaven. I had some really neat graphic artists that we did a lot of things way ahead of any other companies that were doing anything in those days. And we could draw that out, make sure that they knew how the system was going to be, so their sound people knew. And my favorite picture. Now, why I show you that, you notice that horn, that Heil horn that's sitting on a cabinet also, that's only about 6 or 8 feet from him. There's another one right behind Mooney, the drummer. That's for monitors. You see, if you're in the situation with a large arena system, if you're on stage, you can't hear it. If you do, you hear it off of the back wall, 100 feet coming back, and it's all messed up. So what can you do? Because if you're singing and you have to hear the guy next to you, how are you going to do that? Well, we figured it out. And it was Heil Sound that brought monitors to stages. And they didn't feed back because of ham radio. Look at this one. Look how close. And that was powered by 1,000 watt, 2 500 watt amplifiers behind the bass player. And it was all because of ham radio. I learned all this stuff. And we're going to get into explaining and teaching you how that happened. That's another system. They gave me a gold record for that tour. How blessed. But I got back into Marissa and we went crazy. We had 35 employees building all these things that I dreamed up. Modular mixers, modular power amps. If something broke down in the middle of a tour, grabbed a spare parts kit, boom, we're back ready to go. And we had our own wood shop. My brother-in-law ran that. We had a fiberglass shop building all of our fiberglass. What you see in the bottom left, and we're going to talk a lot about that, talk box. The talk box was something that really made Heil sound quite famous. But they were building all these speakers and thousands of them. Up on the left, on the upper right, that is still in existence. That's in our present day plant. But I mean, that was back in the 80s when we were building things. And we're still going strong, building all these things. Now it's mostly just microphones. But we were building big sound systems. I mean, big ones, and being called by all kinds of people. And again, I loved doing it because I told you, I just really love building things. Well, one of the acts that we played with and did all their things was Joe Walsh, WB6ACU. And he was with the James Gang when we got with him in the late 60s. But he wanted to go on his own with a new band called Barnstorm. And he did the record Rocky Mountain Way in a studio in Nashville. Dottie West and Bill West, really good friends of Joe, they gave him this little box that had a little speaker in it and a little bee hose. Now, it was for a recording studio. It didn't have to be very loud. And he put it in his mouth and drove it with his guitar amp, and he could make it talk. Aha, talk box. But he said, Bob, how are we going to do this thing live? Because it's not very loud. So, two hams, right? We figured it out. We came upon the Heil talk box. Had a 250 watt driver in it. And it was really, really something because everybody and his uncle, they had a guitar. They wanted to have a talk box. Okay. And we sold thousands of those things and we built them. Well, one of the things that drove me to that was another ham. I mean, how many times tonight are you going to hear the fact that ham radio brought so many things to everybody? You remember the World War II pilots? They couldn't have a microphone. It was too loud. So they had these little carbon capsules. They'd strap it on their neck and they'd plug them into the microphone input. Well, there was a guy. He was another ham, Alvino Ray. Alvino had played for, in fact, he married one of the King family, and he was a guitarist for them. And he had taken a ham. I used to work him on 20 meters a lot, W6 UK back in the 80s. He took that, put it on his wife's throat behind a curtain and a microphone. And when she'd sing and he'd play, it sounded like his guitar was singing. The early talk box from another ham. So Joe and I figured it out. Joe's roadie crinkle. We got it working, and it worked pretty good. So Rocky Mountain Way was on the way. We were able to make great sounds just by playing around. This was Peter Frampton. That's another story with Peter. I gave him one for a Christmas present. His little gal friend Penny called me one day and said, I need a Christmas present for Peter. How are we going to do that? And I said, well, what do you mean, how are you going to do that? Well, don't give him a guitar. I got lots of guitars. So I said, okay, we'll send you a talk box. So I sent Peter Frampton's girlfriend, Penny McCall. He wrote a song, Penny for Your Thoughts. Any of you Frampton fans? And she gave it to him for Christmas. And this is what came. This was a sound check.
Take the wind out yourself, huh? What else would you like? Keep them talking like that.
This was in South Carolina.
Before one house in the cap. There's certain phrases that I've mastered, you know. You have to learn the whole alphabet.
He's the only guy that could make it talk. Oh, it went from there. Bon Jovi / on and on and on. But I got a little more interested in my radio, and I came back, and moon bounce activities had led me to the TVRO experience. I was watching TV one night. Tom Schneider, remember that guy, late night show? He was sitting in a chair, smoking his usual cigarette, and there was a 6-foot dish beside him. I go, what? Wait a minute. I sat down to see what was going to happen. What was going to happen was he had Bob Cooper on. And you're going to say, who's Bob Cooper? Bob Cooper was the guy, when I had up that big array, he was the guy that I did moon bounce in 62. What he did in, it was probably around 77 or so he started this. He got a 6-foot dish from surplus, took a coffee can and built an LNA. Bingo, 70 megacycle receiver. He could pick up HBO. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. they didn't know. But here's a bunch of hams. We'd meet once a month in Oklahoma City, and he'd teach hams and TV dealers and anybody how to do that. And I did. And like everything else I did, I went a little bit crazy. We sold thousands of these dishes in the late 70s and during 80s in Southern Illinois, because down in that part of the country, in the 70s, there was no television. They were 100 miles from a television station. So bingo, what do you do? And I really enjoyed this part of my business. That Red Thunderbird, I found a dish that folded up like an umbrella, and I could roll into somebody's home and see if it was going to be feasible, because the problem is AT&T, they had these little checkpoints about every 50 miles across the country. And if you were in line with one of those 4 giggers, forget it. So I made sure that everything was working, and it was working very well. I also, during that part of my time of my life, I was 25 years on KMOX radio. I came in front of the microphone. Jim White, W0NJB, was the host. And we covered 44 states, had a tremendous amount of listeners. And I started talking about this satellite stuff. And what led to that was I got at one of the shows, I would be hired by some of the people that go to the shows, CES and some of the big electronic shows, and show off some of the TVRO stuff. Well, I got together with Hubbard family in Minnesota. Boy, I wish we had about 2 hours. What a fabulous story that is. But anyway, they had bought the license, the very first license for K-band. That's way up there, right? They were up at 12 gigs instead of 4. 3 times higher, they could have a small dish. So they sent me one of their dishes in 1991, and it was an experimental thing, and it became DirecTV, and away we went. Well, at the CES show in 1994, I was on ABC television nationally, telling everybody, hey, all the stuff you've been hearing me talk about on KMOX, it's here. And it just went nuts. That's the vice president of RCA. And he came to St. Louis, where we installed the very first DirecTV in a home. That's our plant. Still looks like that today, but doesn't have the inflatable dogs. And there's many, many more buildings behind it. That was just our showroom for home theater. I figured, wait a minute. We got all this stuff happening, and you're going to listen on a 3-inch speaker? I don't think so. And I got into doing all kinds of things for people's home, and I built a home theater and all custom stuff. And the Today Show used it in 1995. It was their Christmas pick. But it had serious consequences here, buddy. Macintosh, phase linear, Clips, Pioneer, JBL. We did it right. And we're talking about building rooms that were $200,000 and $300,000. Got into really neat audio. That's Tom Holman. Tom was a friend, and he helped me design some of the things. He went to work in '82 for George Lucas, and he is the designer of THX, Tomlinson Holman Experiment. And I met Ray Dolby at one of the CES shows, and he brought his ProLogic. It was his prototype, hand-built. And he said, would you try this? And it was the first time that the public had ever heard surround sound. And just as I told you, I am so blessed, because I ended up in all these crazy things because of ham radio. I went a little bit further to end that career. I was designing things for people and talking about it on KMOX. This lady come in and says, here's a picture of my basement in this 100-year-old house. Can you do something with that? And I said, absolutely. No, it's not in my vocabulary. That's what we did with it back there and under that little drape. That's where that room was. And we did lots of stuff. We took that room and made it look like that, worked with a lot of cabinet builders and some designers. But I got back to radio. Enough of this. I'm coming back to radio. And I did. But what happened? Oh my gosh. What happened to my great Art Collins audio? I couldn't believe it. Because when I left, man, that was king. Everything was super. Well, it certainly wasn't super now. So I had to figure out what in the world is happening here. Like what kind of radio you got? And this is how they sounded. I couldn't believe it. They were all like this. And I go, well, wait a minute. What's wrong with your audio? Well, it's fine. Bill said it's on. I talk to Bill every morning. It sounds just fine. I said, no, it doesn't. I can't understand you. You're all muffled. Well, no, that's very cool. I got a matching microphone. You got a matching microphone, huh? Okay. Well, it is painted the same color. And I found out later when I started working for these companies, they don't build their microphones. Oh, I was just stunned because, hey, they're the guys, right? Well, check this out. I'm not pulling any games. Oh, let me get this thing back to flat. There we go. I don't play games with you, everybody. This is a science, and I want you to understand that. I'm going to unplug this microphone. And here's your matching microphone. Well, I'm going to need a lot more gain, but it lost all the transient response, most of the articulation, and no dynamic range. What are we doing this? Well, it's matching. Let me get this out of here. See, we can't argue with these things. Let me get the gain back. We can't argue with these things. I prove these things to you as we go about tonight. And it just always bugged me. And as God would do it, I get a phone call again. And it was from Paul Klipsch, the master of audio. Practically invented the hi-fi movement. And he wanted to come and see me. Are you the guy that had that big PA? I said, yes, sir. He said, I want to come and see that. I want to come and see you. So he flew his plane up to Marissa and spent all day with me. He was much taller than I. I figured, oh, this is not going to be good. He's going to cut me off at the knees. He didn't. All day. Why did you do that? How come you did this? Well, I found out later on from his plant manager, he was on a vendetta because he had never seen anything or heard about anybody with such inefficient speakers and whatever, because he was an efficiency nut. So he flew me down to his home that night in Hope, Arkansas, and it changed my life. It really did. Because he didn't change it that day, but what he did was direct me from his lab, which used to be an old AT&T exchange building down in Hope. That's where he did his wonderful work. That's a plexiglass copy of his wonderful K-horn. And he taught me things. And I'm writing all this down because we didn't have Google. You guys and gals can just find all this, no problem. And I do hope you do. Study a little bit about what's going on in the inside of your equipment. The Bell Labs in the 1920s was the idea factory. They were consolidated of AT&T and Western Electric. That was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. They had 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to this new Bell Telephone Labs. And they were fully dedicated to researching how Our ears worked. You notice we're not talking about voltages and all that. They knew that. What was missing? Because here was the deal. They put up the first telephone system. They had 2 wires, started out in New York, all the way to the West Coast. And every 50 miles across the line, they had little stations that would keep the voltage up, keep the frequency up. Why wouldn't it be the same out there, right? Well, they turned the phone system on, and what did they hear? They heard this. There was no articulation, none. And it's like, what happened? I mean, all of the voltages are right as they checked across the country. The frequencies were right. What is the problem? So they grabbed a couple of their engineers, scientists really, by the name of Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson. They're the guys that figured it out. Look at that curve. I'll talk to guys once in a while. My ears, if I hear flat, I don't need all this EQ. I don't need, really? That's the human ear. Pretty much everybody. And notice, the louder you get, the flatter it is. That's why kids like to listen to music loud, because it's almost flat. So what they had to do, because most people are going to listen down here around 30, 40 dB level, what did they have to do? They had to equalize that line all along. Well, what are we going to equalize? Fletcher and Munson told you. Between 2 and 3K is the sweet spot of articulation. And again, what I'm going to do here, I'm only turning one knob. I'm taking out one control. All I'm doing is taking out the mid-range. Notice the F's and the F's and the P's and the B's are very hard to understand. I'm going to bring back that 2.5. You ready? Here we go. That's all I did. I didn't touch level. I didn't touch bass. I didn't touch anything. I just brought up the mid-range. And I think you will probably realize and understand how important equalization is. It was so important to me. I was just back into the hobby. I'm going, what is going on here? So I took a couple of little filters out of one of our mixers, and I built the first equalizer. Nobody had done this yet. I didn't know that. And I wrote an article, and I sent it to QST. They loved it. Put it in the lead in that magazine of July 1982. And that got the cover award. I didn't ever know they had a cover award. I was very honored, very honored. But it let people understand how important equalization is. But it was a DIY box. But a lot of people didn't want to do it themselves, so they started writing me letters. Hey, build it. So I had to put the plant back together because the plant had been closed for a couple of years. So what we did is started building them and selling them. And actually, it was the start of Heil sound in the amateur radio market because everything else was the pro market. Well, we had to figure out what to do because, again, following Fletcher Munson and all of the scientists, you had to roll off everything under 100. These frequencies just muddy it up. Don't believe me? All I'm doing now, I'm not touching anything. I'm going to bring up that 100 cycles, and it just covers up the mid-range. You don't need it. You don't need it. Get rid of it. I just took down, that was about 10 dB of bass. But notice, let me do that again. It's like a teeter-totter. All I'm touching is the bass. We already set the 2.5. And when I bring this up, well, you turned on the mid-range. No, I didn't. That bass, the filter's sitting at about 106 or 8 cycles, so it just covers it up. We take it down again and make it balanced. There, my friends, if you learn nothing tonight during all these other things we're about to show you, balance of your audio is so important. Balance. And I just proved it to you. Now we have nice lows, have nice highs, everybody's happy. But we want to make sure that we keep that 2.5 elevated. How do you adjust this on your radio? How do you do that? How do you do mic gain? Oh, I just called Bill in the morning, and Bill said, oh, you said, no, turn this, do that. No. You are the engineer. What you want to do is watch the ALC meter. I don't care what it's labeled. That is where you adjust microphone gain. And you don't want to see it just banging into the red all the time. You want to see it bouncing. And, oh, it's going to hit red once in a while. But you want to just keep it bouncing. Sometimes maybe it might not even move at all. You also want to set the bandwidth. You'll have 2.1, 2.4, 2.9. It really makes a difference, by the way, because when you go to 2.9, you're chopping off a couple of hundred cycles on the low end and the top end. So you don't want to do that. You want a 2.4 is where it chops it off. Sorry, 2.9 is full range. That's what you want. No, you're not going to be big time broad because your transmitter won't let that happen. And so you're okay there. Never use compression. We don't need compression. Why do we need compression? If you have proper equalization, proper highs, lows, I just proved that to you. You don't need compression because all that's going to do is cause distortion. Then we want to learn how to use a microphone. What are you talking about, Heil? There is a way to use a microphone properly, and that is never get it more than a couple of inches from your mouth. Why? Again, this is science I'm bringing to you. When you double your distance, you lose 6 decibel. Think about that. When you double the distance. Oh, well, shut up, Heil. All you got to do is turn up the gain. Really? Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. Turn it up. Now it sounds like you're in the gymnasium. You lost your transient response. You lost your dynamic range. And for gosh sake, you lost a lot of your articulation. So you never want to get away from a microphone. No arm's length stuff. No. We can't have any of this stuff. I hear it on the air a lot. And I just feel so sorry because they could be so much better. The other thing you want to pay attention to is a thing called plosives. When you speak into a microphone, everybody has air that air exits into that diaphragm and it pushes it down, and especially on pops and P's. This one isn't because we kind of like helped it along when we built it, and we have really great filtering in here, and all of our microphones are not prone to plosives, but if they are, because some people have a lot more air than others, you want to use a windscreen, but not every windscreen. I'll hear guys every once in a while that say, oh, hey, Bill, take that windscreen off. It muffles you up. It better not. It better not. You bought it at Radio Shack or Walmart or paid $2 on the internet. It must be acoustically transparent. And those cheap things don't. Yeah, it might cost you a couple more dollars. But at least when you put it on, it will not alter the sound. It's acoustically transparent. But no more plosive problems. That's really important. Pattern is important here. Pattern. It's one of my things that I am so blessed that I learned a lot of this kind of stuff from Paul Klipsch about how audio behaves. And what we want to do is make a microphone that you're just not stuck right here. And we also want to look at what is it doing when you move off? Well, to most microphones, you're gone, but not ours. In fact, the proper use of a microphone shouldn't be here. It should be here, because now that air that you exit is not pumping right down, causing that diaphragm to bounce up and down. And again, that's one of the reasons I brought booms to this hobby. We were the first people to do this back in the, oh gosh, it was the 80s, I think 83, right after I got into it. I got to have my hands free. And so we did, and it was pretty cool because it allows me to do a lot. I have a lot of booms. I have a little short one here on my desk that's really nice, and it's adjustable and all that. But anyway, we want to look at what the microphone does, and that's all done with the equalization and the filters you use in it. Too many lows, as we know, doesn't help. We want to get rid of those. Most of these things will go down to even 50 hertz. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. And by equalizing and taking care of that in the microphone, we design a lot of it in the microphone. Look what happens. I mean, just pay attention to what happened when we took all of the low end out. When you do that, my goodness, the power has to go somewhere. So where does it go? It goes to 2.5K, and that's where I want it. So these are things that we need to really understand and pay attention to. And from there, wow. So, well, I'll just go out and buy one of them mixers. I can give me a $50 mixer. Yeah, okay. Go down to Best Buy, whatever. There's only one problem. Mixers are made for music, and the filters, the bass and the treble filters, are set at 80 hertz on the low end and 10K on the top end. Well, fantastic for music, but it sure doesn't help us here, does it? So you have to find a mixer that has mid-range, and hopefully it's a parametric mid. What are you talking about, parametric? Now we're really going to get into one of my favorite subjects. Let me get something here a minute. I forgot to pick this up. Here's the deal. I can't explain it any better. This is your signal. Okay? You got RF. In this case, it's air. And if you could narrow that up, as we just showed you, if you did that, what's going to happen? It has to go somewhere. Where's it going? 2.5 in the mid-range. That power is not stretched out here and wasted energy, because I proved it to you. I proved it to you. It's wasted energy down there. What you want to do is get rid of it. The equalization will help you do that. We narrow it up, and when we do, bingo, it all goes up somewhere, and you've now, as we heard, have beautiful articulation. That's what it's all about. And, you know, from there, I said, wait a minute, we can do this a little better. So this was one of my labs. This was in around 1980, 81, when I got back in the hobby. And that's where the famous HC3 was. I decided that we could build microphone elements to do that. And we have, and we still do. And it has become the contester and DX operators worldwide, as well as, you know, as the other guys and gals. But it helps them, because just as I showed you, they don't care about the low end. They only care about that 2.5, so they cut through. Yeah, it might not sound great to somebody, but these elements are in our headsets today and some of our microphones. And again, these are things that I learned from Paul Clips how to do. The Gold Line was one of the most popular microphones we've ever built, still being built. Wonderful piece. And there's the HC4s and 5s and the wide element, and it automatically equalizes it for you. Look where all your power's going to go. My goodness, right where you need it. But you just have to take care of the microphone, understand how to keep it working for you. That's the main thing. But one of the other things that I wanted to talk about tonight, it's a very, very important subject, and that's how to adjust your radio. One of the things that I learned when hanging around some of these guys, first of all, they wanted to be able to adjust a radio. They wanted certain microphones on it and so on. Joe Walsh, we lived in California for a few years, helping Joe in the studios and stuff like that. And he said, Heil, you need to build me a microphone that I don't have to eat, and I don't want to hear all these guys behind me. So I did. I'm going to unplug this guy. This is the great PR40. I got to check. This thing gets really nasty because it'll overdrive this mixer easily. Got a lot of output. So I did this. First of all, I've always wanted to build a large diaphragm. Nobody ever did it. Shure tried it, failed. Electro Voice tried it, failed. They're all like little inch and a quarter. This thing's inch and a half. But I figured out how to make it work. And then, how do you get rid of the rear? You could do it out of phase. So every microphone out there other than Heil has 4 little holes around the side. That's to set all of their unwanted audio out of phase. That's not enough. They're not even close. So what I did, I opened up the bottom of this big element. It's all the way around 360. We sit it on top of what I call a collection tube. It's just a metal tube with a shock mount on top, the element case. And now all the lows, the mids, the highs, they all come up through the panels on the side into the bottom, out of phase. It's the only microphone ever that has 40 dB of rear. Don't believe it? Here we go. First of all, Joe didn't want to have to stay right in it. You see them with their ball microphones. They can't move away from it. Well, this one, I can go a full 180 degrees and it's still with me. Wow. But then the minute I pass, get underneath, boom, out of phase. It's 40 dB down. Check it out. Oh, it's still working, but not now. It's 40 down. And it really does make a huge difference. We've got radio stations and all kinds of recording studios. They love the PR40 for what it does. Sirius Radio just it's bought 250 of them. And so we're very blessed and honored that they come to us, but they come to us because we've done something for them. And I point this out to you because it all starts at the microphone. It really does. And so we have to think about what we're going to do with all this stuff. Well, first of all, I told you about phasing. We talked about it. Now we're going to learn. You will never forget, ever, the next 5 minutes. Because you got to realize, when Wes Shum started building sideband transmitters, had to get rid of the carrier, had to get rid of the other sideband. How does the notch filter in your radio work? How does a Yagi antenna work? Did anybody ever think about that? How to noise canceling? We could be here all night. I just proved how we get 40 dB because of phasing into PR40. How does it work? Dr. Yagi had no computers, but he figured it out in his head that if he made a director just a little shorter and so far out on a boom from the driven, he could get gain. He could put 2 or 3 and get more gain. But if he came behind, made it longer, it was out of phase because of the position on the boom. Wow, that's how it worked. Well, how many of us have booms and Yagis and directors and never thought about it? I've always wanted a phased array. First of all, I figured, oh man, I got to go to the bank for this one. No, it cost me all of, I think, $23. That's all it will cost you. All you need is 2 dipoles. And we lived down in the Ozarks. We had a home down there for about 8 years. I had 5.5 acres, and I was able to do this. Here's probably the most compelling thing you're going to see tonight, and you're never going to forget it. This is an incredible piece on phased arrays. Completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system, consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directive from east to west, we use a delay line of 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43-foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do, mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after I get done mowing it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Hey, Sue. Well, I see they introduced big display on it, and I don't know if that is their form of portable, or what that is. Your wire.
An amazing, amazing antenna. Costs nothing once you have a couple dipoles. So you have to think about some of these things if you have a room and, I don't have much room. Hey, you have 33 feet. Put up a 40-meter one. Man, it hit play on 40 meters. I had a 33 foot apart, 33 high. There again. Oh, I wish we had hours and hours, because that's the key part. You want to be at wavelengths. Guys that put up on 75 meters. Well, I'm at 65 feet, which is the perfect place, unless 120. I'll go from 65 to 80. Boy, it'd be better. Sometimes, and not, it'll be worse. because it's not harmonically related. And so 33 foot on 40 meters is killer. 33 foot apart, 33 high, wow. I mean, it's killer. But these are all things that I just love to share with everybody because I don't hear about this stuff, and it really bugs me. And I'm going to do one other thing here that takes a little time, but I think we need to talk about it. And that's how to adjust your receivers and stuff. The DSP setups are sometimes pretty hard to understand, and boy, you're not going to get it from the manufacturers. But you really want to make sure the microphone is right, and then listen to yourself in another receiver with headphones. No, you're not going to blow it up. Stick a couple of feet of wire in the back of it and of the receiver, you'll be all right. But here's something about RF gain. Oh, I got to have that RF gain wide open. I've never used RF gain wide open. Never. Well, make it signal better. No, it makes the signal worse. Prove it. Okay, here it is. Check this out.
Mostly just involved in right turn on the 2 meter net and the 40 and 80 meter nets.
Signal went way down, but his audio came up.
It used to be on packet, but I don't enjoy.
When I turn it back up, all the noise comes up, covers up his audio. So you never want to use RF gain wide open. Never, ever, because it doesn't help you. And here comes another one that's very interesting about AGC. You want to keep it slow, not fast. Here's the proof. And this again these are recordings I took off the air, and I think you'll learn a lot from this particular one.
This old stuff that we used to do, and then apply it to a new application.
He sounds like he's on FM.
That's very good.
You lower the RF gain. You cause slow. Here we go to fast.
Come along with this hobby. The technician class was
Covers him up.
technician class test.
Always want to be slow.
And I like that part too. So very good comment.
It's like FM. Why don't I hear about this? I don't understand it. And it's really simple with ICOMs. I was very blessed to work with them when they came up with the Pro 1, and it has my 2-band equalizer in all of them, all the way through to the 7300. You want to roll off the bass, -3, get rid of that low end, not all the way because it balances out. Then you want to punch that treble up to about +4. And we proved that a while ago here. If you want to set compression and use it, you certainly don't want much of it. I don't use any of it. And you want to set the mic gain to start at about two-thirds, and then you want to look at the meter and see where it's going. But the Yaesu is a lot different. Oh boy. If we have Yaesu owners, you're going to learn a lot here because they certainly don't help you. I was, in 1999, ICOM came to me. Dr. Inouye was planning a new line of radios, and he sent a picture of his station. It had one of my EQ200s and a gold line. The founder of ICOM. I'm going, whoa. Talk about blessed. Oh, he wanted me to make sure it would be done right. He wanted a new radio to have it. Everything from the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through to the 7300, 7610, and this little guy. I just got this one. They want me to build a headset for it. You know about this guy? Oh my gosh. I thought, oh boy, this'll be some toy. This, my friends, is a 7300 and more in a little box that you can hold in your hand, run it from 12 volts or the battery. That's what it's doing here. Is this cool or what? I mean, to tell you, I am really impressed. It's going. Don't have an antenna on it. Anyway, all of their products have my 2-band EQ in them. Dr. Hasegawa come to me at Dayton it was a year or two later. I wanted to do it better. I said, okay, you can do a parametric. Yeah, who do that? I said, but you're going to have a problem. What be the problem? Education. What do you mean? Well, it's not just 2 little knobs, boost cut. The parametric EQ that I designed, first of all, in the 9000, which is a great piece of gear, there are 9 controls. That is why so many guys that have Yaesus use it in the default mode, but oh, they could be so much better. And in the next 2 minutes, you're going to learn how to do it. I could take a 10-year-old child and teach them how to do this. Very simple, very simple. The regular 2-band EQ has 2 filters, 160, 3K, okay? Plus or minus. Here, you are the engineer, so you have to set what frequencies they're going to be at. We have 3 filters. We're going to take the first one, and we're going to set it at where? 160. Why at 160? Because we're going to, with the next control, roll it off. Roll off everything under 160. Goodbye. The third knob is the octave. How wide do you want that 160 to encapsulate? Just use it at 2 octaves. You're okay. I set all mine at 2 octaves. Doesn't make that much difference. Second filter, where are you going to put it? I find that there's a real boxy sound in some of these radios around 800 to 1200 hertz. So I usually go about 1,000 cycles. A lot of times you got to listen to see exactly where. 1,000 cycles. This is where the second filter now. 1,000 cycles. And we're going to roll it off a little. 2 octaves wide. That's 6 knobs. What do you go with the last 3? You already are ahead of me on this one. Set it at 2.5K, 2 octaves, plus the heck out of it. Increase, elevate, 2.5K. Was that hard? No. Why isn't that? It's all over our website. I have about 50 pages. It's called All Things Yaesu, All Things ICALM, All Things Elecraft, All Things Everybody. Just go to the support pages and there's all kinds of stuff to help you. That's what I want to do. I want to help you because for gosh sakes, the manufacturers are not on our side. And I hate it because we all could have better signals if they would have listened. Well, they don't have to. We're doing it. And that's why I do these. I take I'm doing 3 and 4 of these a week. 2 weeks ago, I did 7 of them, one every day. I love it. I'm taking my time. My sweet wife, Sarah, who owns the company, she understands how important it is, not just our customers, for all of ham radio to learn this science. But nobody's doing it. So, okay, I'm doing it. I hope it helps some. But I got one last thing to talk about. We talk about the transmitter. What the heck about the receiver? Well, my receiver's fine. No, it's not. All receivers. I work for these companies. Now, don't forget, I got an inside look. They all have 1, maybe 2 watts in the big $10,000 job. You ready for this? This is no nonsense. 10% distortion. It's like, what? Come on. Because you have never seen a spec sheet on receiver audio. Think about it. They tell you about, oh, the sensitivity, oh, the selectivity. I don't care about that. It's going to be okay. You already took care of that. What are you going to do about that? Audio. So I did something about it. I designed the parametric receive audio system. And what it is, it's a complete audio system with 3 filters. 6K on the top, 160 on the bottom. But the mid-range is parametric, and you are the engineer, and you can set it where your ears need it. We have a frequency control and a gain. Usually I'll turn the gain up of that filter, usually about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and leave it for most. The highs and the lows, you know, you're going to roll off the highs and lows anyway, so you set them and leave them. The master is going to be in the mid-range. Also, we have 2 separate, very low distortion amplifiers for headphones. You can have a logger and you can have the operator, 2 separate levels and all that. But you also can have left or right. And I can't tell you how many emails and phone calls that I get. People just going crazy because they said, you give me my radio back, because they have a hearing imbalance. Well, here they can put the left side in one and the right side in the other. Bingo, I give them the radio back. Well, let's see if we can't find out how to make this all work. And we can. What I did is I made some recordings off air, right? It came out of one of my my transmitters and transceivers. And what you're going to hear are real live recordings. And I think you're going to go away saying, whoa, I think I need one of those. Everybody does, because we all have hearing situations when we get a little older. So we're going to get the levels all set. Okay, here. I'll come back to this. This is a DX station. Okay, here you go.
Echo India.
Here we go with 2.5. Listen. Here he is flat, the way you hear him.
Germany. Hope I have it right. Very good day to you from Ireland. Name is William in India.
There's the way you hear him.
Hello, CQ 20 meters. Echo India 8 Bravo, Lima Bravo, EI 8LB calling him.
Amazing.
Here are a couple of usual single sideband signals that are mushy and bassy, difficult to understand. So you can add some speech articulation just by adding some 2.5 mid-range.
Of the 2 meter, you know,
That's the way you hear him.
they're just not, it's not the same as a rig built, you know, just for 2 meter sideband.
Back to flat.
You know, the receivers will never compare. So it's kind of nice that, again, ICOM technology.
And it's all about equalization. I first built the EQ200, and I still get it occasionally. I get these guys, oh, I don't need no darn EQ. We all need EQ. Everything you have that has any audio in it has been equalized. Well, I don't have no bass or treble. No. Remember those 4,000 scientists? They have instructed, they have taught us building a gear that it has to be there. Just put it there. Put about 5, 6, 8 dB of 2.5 and everybody be happy. And you don't need to adjust it. They've already done that for you. But boy, when you have it, you can do some pretty cool things. But I hope you guys and gals got into some of this. I am so thrilled with this project. We did this in 2018 and 19 on Ham Nation. As you know, I'm a builder. I love to build things. And we started the Pine Board project. That's the way we built them back in the early days. Built them on your mom's breadboard. And we built a complete band switching AM 160, 75, and 40 meter transmitter, 5 watts. And just amazing, almost 1,000 people. How do I know that? Antique Electric Supply down in Arizona, they put all the parts together in kits. So you can go down there and get the Pine Board EQ, the Pine Board power supply, and the Pine Board final. All the parts are there, and we know how many they sold. The diagrams are just incredible. They're from my friend Gene W4IQN. Look at him. He is better than Heathkit. You don't need a schematic. That was the other thing. A guy, well, I don't know how to read a schematic. You don't need to. All you need is Gene's diagram. Isn't that cool? And I'm just so thrilled that we can bring things to the hobby that mean something. That's the whole thing. It's very meaningful. And I do have to say one word here in the final about ICOM. I work for them, understand. I love their stuff. But they're a different breed than Kenwood, Elecraft, anybody else. They have very low gain front ends, which means you have to use an electret. Most electrets are junk. J-U-N-K, junk. Well, we have very, very stringent parameters when we use pieces and parts to go in our microphones. And Dr. Inouye wanted me to build a proper microphone for the ICOM, and we did. And we got a silver one and we got a black and gold. They're very inexpensive. They come with their own cable and their own connector because it wouldn't work on a Kenwood or a Yaesu, so you can't plug, or you can plug it in, but it won't work. And that's a cool bass I came up with. And the push to talk, when you push it down, the bass lights up. Hey, I know. I'm 80 years old. I look like I'm 50 and act like I'm 12. I love it. I love sharing all this stuff. And the last thing we're doing, we just came out with the BM17, and we have it with the IC element for ICOM. Also make it the dynamic for Kenwood, Elecraft, and all of that. It is one great performer. And like all of our headsets, I read EHAM a lot, almost every day. Because every once in a while, I'll see somebody giving us some real razzes about, oh, Heil headset, they hurt my head. They didn't read the instructions. Every headset we build has a steel band underneath the padding. And so if you have a larger head, don't be afraid you're not going to break it. If you got a skinny head like me, a pinhead, okay. Every one of our headsets do that. And I've a number of guys, I've written them and said, hey, you might want to just bend it. And then they'll come back and say, wow, I didn't know that. Well, there you are. Well, I got this in my hand. This is one I'm really proud of. It took me a couple of years to do that. There's a couple running around trying to do David Clark, but they knockoffs, but they don't understand audio. They $800 instead. It's crazy. This thing is loaded. First of all, it has interchangeable elements, dynamic or the IC, just unplug them. And it has a balance control left to right. So if you have a hearing imbalance, it works great. It also has a jack on the side of this cup that's monitor out. So if you're in a like a field day or whatever, the second logger or whatever, or just a listener can plug his headphone into here. You don't need a bunch of Y cords and all that. Just plug it into there. And here's the killer. We're the only company that does this. Been doing it for many, many years. It's a phase switch. What are you talking about? Phase in a headphone? What's that all about? Well, what that's all about, you know what phasing will do now. You learned about it. Things can cancel, they can move. You go into a pileup and you hear a little wheekie back here. If you reverse the phase of those speakers, he comes up front just by reversing the phase of the speakers. Very simple. And that's why you look through the magazines and tell me the percentage. It's very, very high of all of our headsets because they all have it. Because that's just a piece of it. This one I'm extremely proud. It's got Paul clips written on. What are you talking about, Heil? I've always wanted to do this, but I didn't have enough cup depth. We do here. The speaker is actually sitting right here. Look how far away from your ear it is. So what happens there, people that have hearing aids, any other headset, they're right up against you and they feed back like crazy. Do it yourself. If you do that tight on your head, listen to what happens to your audio. It gets crazy. But if you back off a little bit, it doesn't affect it. Well, that's why this is becoming the headset. Very proud. Very proud of it. And I've told you about the BM17 and all that. And the last thing I want to tell you about, this is something that you were on my case for years. You got to do something for my handy talkie. And so we did. They're all junk. Not this one. It's got Heil on it. You won't find junk. I don't allow it. And I'm very proud of this because this headset was put together and dreamed up by our staff. I okayed what they did, but man, does this thing work? It costs less than a couple of bottles of beer. I'm telling you, it's amazing. And we're very proud to be able to help you with things like that. And then the last is, what do you do about the wire? Well, I hate the wire. What are you talking about? Well, you go look at your matching microphone that you got. You pay attention, and you're going to discover something very interesting. First of all, it's 24, 26 gauge wire. You got to be kidding me. Well, yeah, that's true. They break a lot. But the connector is a joke. It's made by Foster. It was developed in 1960s for CB radio. And they got that little bitty thin little thing, and it's really hard to get on there. Ours is about a 1/2 inch, and it really works. But you'll also notice with your matching microphone, what's all this junk about here? That's because the wire isn't made for that cable clamp. So they just put black tape or something around it, heat shrink. That doesn't work for a while. We make the cable to fit the connector because we build the connector. And you can pull your car with that thing. It's so tight. And there is no black tape or anything. It also has a second output for push to talk. And you can put the push to talk. The wire, I'm really proud of this. Nobody builds wire like this. In fact, we sell tens of thousands of feet of this stuff to broadcasters and all kinds of people building great gear and want good wire. First of all, silver, it's a complete 100%. You take the wire that you probably have in your matching microphone and you pull it apart and you end up with about 2 little leads. This is 100%. But notice there are 2 black and white balanced line, 18 gauge, nothing like it, nothing. So for the broadcast industry, they love it because they're not going to destroy it. And the blue and the red, that's push to talk outside of the shield. And why did I do that? Because that's DC. And in every single solitary microphone builder, they're inside together, man. You talk about RFI, you got DC and AC all inside, and AC is into a very sensitive input. We saw a lot of RFI problems just by changing the cable. But why don't you just change the microphone while you do it? But anyway, check out that wire. But I'm just really, really thrilled to be able to bring all this to you. And in closing, I'm proud of this. I barely made it through high school, as I told you. And here a few years back, I received a PhD from Mizzou University. And after the speech I'd given and so on, the chancellor asked me how I felt. And I said, well, my stepson, took him 16 years. He's an honest-to-goodness PhD. But, you know, I don't know. He said, oh, no. It took you 50 years. And I never thought about it. But over all the time, all night, you've heard me say, it was ham radio. Ham radio was at the front of everything I did. And then they really laid one on me. A few years back, we're the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The hall got to looking one day, you've got all these artists, great artists, but they wouldn't probably be here if it wasn't for the equipment they have. And they thought that we were the ones. I said, there's so much bigger companies. They said, yeah, but they haven't done the innovations that you did. And I have to accept that because they're kind of right. And so I'm really blessed by all, and mostly blessed by your friendship. And I love working you guys on the air. I'm on the air a lot. 3885 every morning, 9 o'clock, over there. you get to hear the Harvey Wells and other things. I do other things, but usually it's the Harvey Wells and my Mosley receiver, very rare, but it's cool. And of course, the wonderful West Shum 20A and all the other things that go with it. I really appreciate your time. I know I probably went way over what you wanted, but how can you just rush through some of this? I want you to really dig into some of this, and you'll have this recorded. Go back and visit some of it. And if you need me, I'm always there for you. It's my call at ARRL gets it, K9EID at ARRL.net. And send me an email. I get lots of email. And guess what? I answer them. I do. I never let one go by. If it goes by, it's somewhere up in the heavens and I don't know where it is, but if I see it, I answer it. Because you wrote me usually with a question. And so you want to take care of that. So there's the story. Do we have any questions? I got all night, but I know you guys don't and gals. So let me know if there's anything we can go through. I'm here for you.